This video is a slightly different one to the ones that I usually do on the channel. Generally speaking, this channel is about a journey into music from a different time. However, for me, it's often a portal into a different time where I can learn about the culture. And that's what I'm going to be doing here, hopefully with these two interviews from a character who I think fundamentally shaped the culture of the late 60s, 70s and beyond. And that's Paul McCartney. I'm going to be covering two of his interviews, one of which is very famous because he speaks explicitly about LSD use, which I think shook up a lot of people at the time. And so here we go. Hopefully you guys find this as interesting and fascinating as I do. Okay, so the first of the two interviews is the LSD interview, where it's a interview that takes place in Paul McCartney's garden, which I think is really funny, and it's done by ITV, which is a British television network channel. And he's 25 years old here. He's actually just celebrating his 25th birthday, so keep that in mind. Here we go.
Paul, how often have you taken LSD?
Straight out the gate.
Well, 4 times.
And where did you get it from?
Well, you know, I mean, if I was to say where I got it from, you know, it's illegal and everything. It's silly to say that.
Don't you believe that this was a matter which you...
I love the little wry smile on his face, the cheeky little smile he has, where he's saying he took it 4 times. Like, he knows it's kind of wrong, but he still says it.
Where did you get it from?
Well, you know, I mean, if I was to say where I got it from, you know, it's illegal and everything. It's silly to say that.
Don't you believe that this was a matter which you should have kept private?
But the thing is, you know, that I was asked a question by a newspaper. And the decision was whether to tell a lie or to tell him the truth, you know. I decided to tell him the truth. But I really didn't want to say anything, you know, because if I had my decision, you know, if I had it my way, I wouldn't have told anyone, you know, because I'm not trying to spread the word about this. But the man...
Okay, so I've heard rumors about this interview that he gave where he admitted to taking drugs, essentially, right? And it kind of caused a real uproar because they were so popular with young people, and they parents and older people, more conservative people, felt as if this was like destroying the culture of the time. There was like brainwashing the youth into doing bad things, which I think happens every generation, right? It was first with Elvis, where he was doing his little jig with his hips, and they felt as if it was too sexual, which is crazy to think about because you have like half naked people on TV now all the time. So it's a funny little one to look back on, but really interesting that he is just being honest here. They asked him a question, and he's like, yeah, I took it. If you ask me a question, I'm going to be honest.
From the newspaper is the man from the mass medium, you know. I'll keep it a personal thing. If he does too, you know, if he keeps it quiet. But he wanted to spread it, so it's his responsibility, you know, for spreading it, not mine.
But you're a public figure, and you said it in the first place. You must have known that it would have made the newspapers.
Yes, but to say it, you know, is only to tell the truth. I'm telling the truth, you know. I don't know what everyone's so angry about.
Well, do you think you have now encouraged your fans to take drugs?
I don't think it'll make any difference, you know. I don't think my fans are going to take drugs just because I did, you know. But the thing is, that's not the point anyway, you know. I was asked whether I had or not. And then from then on, the whole bit about how far it's going to go and how many people it's going to encourage is up to the newspapers and up to you know, on television. I mean, you're spreading this now at this moment. This is going into all the homes, you know, in Britain.
He's got a point.
And I'd rather it didn't, you know. But you're asking me the question. You want me to be honest. I'll be honest, you know.
But as a public figure, surely you've got...
I mean, I think that's a pretty damn fair point, right? He's gonna, if you ask him a question, he can only really tell you the truth, right? That's what he's saying. If you're a sincere human being, you're gonna tell the truth about what happened. And I guess he's right in the sense that if the newspaper company actually feels like it's a bad thing to spread, why did they publish it? And then kind of chastise him for saying it. I mean, just don't put the information out. I think it's a fair point.
Got a responsibility to lots and
No,
lots
it's
of
you've
teenagers.
got the responsibility. You've got the responsibility not to spread this now. You know, I'm quite prepared to keep it as a very personal thing, if you will too. If you'll shut up about it, I will.
Yeah, firstly, the thing that kind of strikes out at me is his kind of like wit and charm, that British wit and charm. I think it's specifically Scousers as well. They're very cheeky, and he's definitely got that. I love the accent. Also, I think they were in a very rare space in the fact that they came first. You know, there wasn't a lot of people who were around before them to kind of set the tone, and so they were in this crazy space. I mean, they were as famous as anyone has probably ever been. 25 years old here, putting out music that is resonating with people, causing the culture to shift. I mean, think about the power that exists in this young person's hands. It's crazy that he didn't abuse it more, and he's just being sincere. And I think it's a lot of like nonsense being made about it. You know, if you ask him a question, he's going to tell the truth. Interesting one. Let's go on to the next one, see what he's got to say in this next interview. Okay, this next interview was taken a year later. This is in 1968. This is part of a BBC documentary, and it's, I think, Paul McCartney speaking about essentially the recording process and about inspirations from classical music, I believe. Here we go.
I was always frightened of classical music, and I never wanted to listen to it because it was Beethoven and Tchaikovsky and sort of big words like that, and Schoenberg. You know, I always thought... I mean, so like a taxi driver the other day had some sheet music of a Mozart thing. And I said, what's that, you know? And he said, oh, that's the high-class stuff. You won't like that. He said, no, you won't like that. And I said, well, what is it, you know? He said, oh, no, you won't like it. You know, it's high-class, that. It's very high-class, highbrow.
Bit rude.
And that kind of way, I always used to think of it. I used to think, well, you know, that's very clever, all that stuff. And it isn't, you know, it's just exactly what's going on in pop at the moment. Pop music is the classical music of now.
Okay, super interesting, really fascinating point he made there. Wow. Okay, so basically what he's trying to say is that the stuff that we look back on, you know, the Mozart, the Bach, all that rigmarole is essentially doing what they were doing in their time. Meaning what the Beatles were doing in their time is equivalent to what those guys were doing. It was the pop music of the time that Bach and Mozart were making. And I guess with time, the significance grew to the point where people think it's maybe more important than it is. I mean, it's obviously important. It laid the foundation for more music to come. But it's given this kind of righteous place in musical history, which I think he's trying to say is maybe a little bit false.
People just take our music and, you know, in a line, and we just sort of say, yeah, she was just 17. And they read everything into that, you know. So she was a 17-year-old nymphomaniac working on the streets of Broadway. But, you know, what we meant is she's just 17. But it might mean all the other as well. I don't know, you know. I've no idea if there's any Aeolian cadences and, you know, miasmic climaxes and all of that. I mean, we're the last people to know about our songs because the pop world's never heard the pop world as such. Because we can't, you know, it's like if you look at a snapshot of yourself, you're looking at what tie you were wearing or whether you were looking nice in the snapshot. You know, but anyone else will just take the snapshot and say, oh, that's good, that's a snapshot of Tony. You know, it's nice. We really just always think of ourselves as just happy little songwriters, just little rockers, you know, just playing in a rock group. But it gets more important than that after you've been over to America and you've sort of got knighted. And when we were touring and when it was at a sort of...
I think one of the most interesting parts about listening to Paul McCartney in this period of his life is that you're really listening or having a kind of ability to hear an artist at the peak of their genius. And it's really rare that you can have someone documented like that, like a Picasso or even a Brando, when they come to the zenith of their powers, where like experience has met confidence, where they've put in a bunch of work beforehand. You know, they did gigs in Germany and they learned to be great musicians. And then you have the confidence of having created great music beforehand. So you feel like, yeah, I can do something great here. And then it all comes together in this moment where you're just making brilliant work after brilliant work, which they were doing at the time. And I think the rarest part of the Beatles is that it's four of them together, right? Often it's just one guy. I mentioned Picasso or even Brando, who came to their zenith. Like I think of Brando in like Waterfront and Viva Zapata, A Streetcar Named Desire, but it's just him on his own, right? The fact that Beatles had four guys, all brilliant, all coming to the height of their powers together, I think it's why they made such a huge impact.
The peak of hysteria. Instead of just thinking, oh, that's nice. I mean, we could have just thought, aha, click. let's use this and for evil, But there's no desire in any of our heads to sort of take over the world, That was Hitler. That's what he wanted to do. There is, however, a desire to get power in order to use it for good. If you've got power, you've got to use it for the good. Because like everyone else, we read the papers, we go through all the things that most people go through. So if everyone wants to say a thing at a certain time, it's handy being a songwriter. You can put your finger on it, like a yellow submarine. That was lucky, though.
Wow. Okay. Again, he's just super witty and brilliant, and it's kind of obvious in the way he talks, the way he expresses himself. You can see how he's such a fantastic songwriter. The quirky little things he comes up with and he says, the miasmic powers, whatever he was. Yeah.
Miasmic climaxes, all of that.
And it is kind of true what they say about the Beatles lyrics and stuff, right? People break it down and they think it's more than it is. And he's saying, like, when I say she's just 17, it could just mean that she's just 17, or all the other stuff. Really interesting, fascinating insight into someone who kind of changed the world through art, which I think is one of the coolest things in the world. And he seems like a really cool dude as well. Seems like a really good guy. Like he was saying, he's not trying to misuse the power, which they could have at the time. They had so many people listening to them. Fascinating stuff. Hopefully you guys enjoyed that. This was a slightly different video than the normal ones that we do. And if you guys did enjoy, maybe we can do another one like this looking at a different artist. So catch you guys on the next one. Peace.